So Lily, I'm privileged to have gone to high school and then to university. But I remember when I went to high school, there's never at any moment in my high school career or studying that I was asked, Eunice, you could be a teacher, you could be a hairdresser, you could be a driver, you could be anything else that you want. I don't ever recall prostitution being one of those economic choices that I could make as a career.
She's my a special lady. She's the only one.
Salam and hello, everyone. My name is Lily Bakala Piper, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Nairobi has been my home for 12 years. And in this city that is full of culture and life, entrepreneurship, and just people and populations of across the globe, there are also 40,000 women and girls involved in sex work. Today's conversation is all about these women and these girls. These women who make their living, support their families, and find their livelihoods on the streets of Nairobi. Now, that number, 40,000, is certainly very sobering, and it doesn't really capture or do justice to the number of women throughout the country, the region, and the continent who are involved in sex work and in human trafficking, oftentimes, and many would say every time, against their choice. There are many people involved in the ecosystem of sex work. Of course, there are the women themselves. There are those who recruit and train them. There are their clients and their perpetrators. And then there are people like you and I, normal people who maybe live and work and are neighbors to these women and are very uninvolved with the issue, maybe tangentially know about it or hear about it on the news, but are otherwise uninvolved. Recently, a good friend of mine, Faith, brought to my attention the issue and invited me to talk to her friend, Eunice Mathu. Eunice is a Kenyan woman who went away for some time, got her schooling and training in the UK. She has a master's in gender and international development from the University of East Anglia. And on one of her trips back to Nairobi, her eyes were opened to the scale of the sex work industry. But unlike me, and unlike many of us, she didn't just see it and observe it from a distance, but she decided to get involved. Eunice moved back to Kenya a few years ago and started the Rejesha Project. The Rejesha Project is committed to helping women leave the sex work industry. Traditionally, this industry, we've called it prostitution, and we've called the women involved prostitutes. But for me, that term is not very comfortable. So during this conversation, I'm going to refer to it as sex work. Some might call that PC, but I think it is important that we try as much as we can with our language, with our words, and most importantly, with our actions to bring dignity to these women and these communities. And Eunice and the Rejesha Project are doing that through the work that they have started in 2019. Their plan and their approach is really quite simple. They share a meal with women in Nairobi's red light districts. They build relationships, and over time and conversation, they invite these women to consider an alternate way of work. And the reason they do that is because Eunice's research and her understanding of the field is that sex work for almost all women is not a choice. So today's conversation is to help us better understand the issue and hopefully to get involved. So I'm really glad that you've tuned in today, and I'm really pleased to introduce you to Eunice Mathu, the founder of the Rejesha Project. And I'm equally honored and delighted that one of the women that she's come to befriend and come to know, named Angela for the sake of this show, is also joining us to tell us her story of being a sex worker here in Nairobi. So if you're listening to this episode, maybe with young children or others, who this topic may be a bit triggering for you or sensitive, then maybe this isn't the episode for you. But I hope that most of you will lean in and really listen to the stories, the data, and the relationships that have been built and the stories that are being told. I think it's really important for us to be active and involved citizens, not only in Nairobi, but wherever you are listening. So please welcome to the show, Eunice and also Angela. Eunice, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And
This is a delight to be here.
we're so honored that you'd be here. And we're going to hear from Angela a little bit later, but I want to go ahead and say to Angela, Karibu sana. So when Faith introduced us a few weeks ago, maybe months ago now even, we had a coffee and you were telling me about a story when you visited Kenya with some friends on holiday.
Yeah.
You grew up in Kenya.
I
Remind me
did.
where you grew up, though.
I grew up in Nyeri,
In
which
Nyeri.
is a nice place to grow up.
It
It's the
is.
highlands, surrounded by the mountains. Mount Kenya is on one end, and then Aberdeen is on the other. So it's really beautiful, and that's where I still call home.
Yeah, a rural girl went to the big city.
I know, right?
Went across the ocean for schooling,
Yes.
came back for holiday. And do you mind telling us a little bit about this story that started to first open your eyes to the sex work industry here in Kenya?
So I had gone to the UK in my late teens. And then on my first holiday back home, and as you do, you come over Christmas because you're running away from the winter.
Of course.
It's cold. Two of my girlfriends, we take a holiday to Kilifi. And Kilifi is beautiful. It's in the coast of Kenya. It's by the beach and the sea. And we really wanted to experience that. So on this holiday, I didn't know, and I have to say, I am a 21-year-old, so naive, and I did not know what really happens in Kilifi. This is my first time also going to Kilifi. And while we are there, and when I tell you, every place we went to, we would meet very young girls with older men, but then when we go into the clubs or we go into the coffee shops, and my friends and I are being asked, "Oh, are you here? Are you looking?" And I'm thinking,
For what?
looking for what?
Right.
So it was an evening we'd gone out to one of the clubs, and two of my friends, they go to the bathroom and they leave me in charge of our table. And this guy comes over and says, "Hey, you girls are so beautiful, and I want to invite you to my house tomorrow. I have a chef, I have a pool." And I'm thinking, okay, that's really nice, but it's not really impressive. We have all of that where we're
Right.
staying. So when my friends come back and I say to them, "Oh, you see that gentleman over there? This is what he's offering us to go and do at his house tomorrow." And my friend, who is a few years older than me, says, how naive, how silly are you? Do you know what he's asking you to go and do? And I had no idea. I had no idea. But for me, Lily, what happened is I now saw it everywhere.
And how did that sit with you, having grown up here, being gone for just schooling, really, and coming back? How did that feel?
I remember thinking, I don't like what I've just seen. I don't like what's going on. And when I say for me, my eyes opened. I went back to my last year of university in the UK, but it stuck with me. It sat with me for the longest time, and it didn't go away. And I just kept researching and finding out, what is this thing? What is it even called? Does it even have a name? And I found that it does have a name. It's sex tourism. And then it goes beyond that. It goes beyond sex tourism to child sex tourism. That there are people who go to different destinations, such as coastal areas, and come here, and what they want to do is exploit the young girls who are there, mainly because of the economic situation in these places, but also because our country, such as where we are, it has the laws only go so far. So they can come and they can do whatever they like and can get away with it. So for me, I remember thinking, I don't like that. And I would ask, because I'm a Christian, and I remember I would ask God, is there something that you want me to do in this? Do you want me to do anything about it? Because the more I research, the more I find out, and it goes deeper and deeper, and I'm just saying, I don't like it. I don't like it. And I would like to do something about. And truly and honestly, that's where the journey began. And it's now been over 10 years of this journey and growing into it and just realizing that there's
something you can do.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that legal landscape that this problem exists in. And I think we're going to talk a little bit later about kind of the different sides of the argument. Yeah. Some people may not consider it a problem per se, but I think what you said and what have identified, particularly around the child sex tourism, I don't think anyone would disagree that when you do not have autonomy and you are a minor, that it is a problem.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the legal framework in Kenya. What is legal here? And we know laws vary from country to country, but what did you find and learn about the legal framework here as related to sex work?
So sex work is illegal in Kenya. Our penal code makes it that it's a felony. If you're caught soliciting or benefiting from earnings made from sex work, that is a felony and it could take you to prison for up to 7 years, maybe even more. But here is the tricky situation. You have to be caught in the act of sex work, which is highly unlikely for anyone to be caught doing that. It's such a secretive, discreet nature of work. So it is illegal. It is also illegal for anyone who would come and solicit minors for prostitution or sex work. That is illegal according to our laws. But so what I say is everything that is on paper, the law on paper and the law on the ground is just so different. Who is policing the minors at the clubs? Who's policing the tourists? And when I say tourist, I don't want to just make it that it is foreigners who come, because there are seasons where tourism is mainly
domestic.
From inside of Kenya. So we do have tourists who will leave Nairobi and go to the coast for the business.
For sure. Let me just follow up on that though, because I just want to understand, does it also mean though that the laws penalize the women, and we're focusing on women here? We know that there are men also involved in sex work, but as opposed to their clients, which again would be predominantly men, as opposed to criminalizing the men who may be soliciting sex work.
Yes.
Is that how it's
that's
how it's enforced?
Yes.
So it's the women who are targeted and arrested potentially, as opposed to their clients.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the risk, the all of that is really on the shoulders of women, on half of the population. So some of the work and the words that Rejesha Project uses that I found really compelling was that sex work is not a choice. So that must have been something that in your understanding of the research, you came to that conclusion before starting Rejesha. So tell me why such a bold and strong statement that sex work is not a choice.
I'm so glad you asked that question because I stand by it. I believe that it is not a choice. And the reason why I say that, I always give the example of, so Lily, I'm privileged to have gone to high school and then to university. But I remember when I went to high school, there's never at any moment in my high school career or studying that I was asked, Eunice, you could be a teacher, you could be a hairdresser, you could be a driver, you could be anything else that you want. I don't ever recall prostitution being one of those economic choices that I could make as a career. So when we then say that it is a choice, let's look at who is it a choice for? And if it's only a choice for people who don't have other choices to choose from, that's the only economic choice that you have, then it is a choice to the marginalized, the poor, those who've gone through a lot of trauma, underserved, underprivileged. Then that's the choice for those who don't have other economic choices to make. So I do strongly believe that for us it is not a choice. And when you get to know the women, when you get to interact with them and you hear about their stories and their journey, it's not a choice. they would never had any other alternatives to make.
So let's pause there. That's a really powerful statement, that if it is only a choice for the poor and the marginalized, then is it really a choice? I think that's really compelling, because there's a time not too far in our history where there were certain professions that only women did. If you have any background in the US or the UK, like you, there are professions that only Black people did. So we all have touch points outside of this one where we can look and say, yeah, there was only a time where Black people were the only people in service roles. And we wouldn't have argued that being a professional or whatever was not a choice for them. But there's certainly the conversation around sex work is changing. I want to ask you a couple of questions related to that, because it's a really powerful and a really compelling way that you've succinctly summarized a really complex issue. Can I ask you a little bit about your word choice? For you, does prostitution still ring true as the right word to use for this? And the women that you work with, what words do they use to describe the work that they're doing?
So that is, I feel like that's a twofold question.
It is, because it's also Kiswahili, right? So this is an Anglophone term that we're using, an English term. Yes. So maybe it's not even a fair question, really.
Yes. Because for me, so the women on the streets, and they're not shy to use any word that describes them. I think they have been, all these words and names that have been used to describe them, so they have internalized that, so they will be very free to say, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I simply, if you judge me for what I do, I think that's on you. So it is fair to use the word sex work, and the reason for that is, and as Rejesha, we do this, we want to give respect and dignity to these women where they're at. You have to remember that these ladies have educated their children, some of them all the way to university, working in sex work. So we have to give it the respect that it deserves. It is incredibly dangerous and abusive and exploitative industry. But for some of these ladies, they have worked there for 30 odd years and that's their main income. So it is work. It is, in a way, it is a profession. And when we're there, honestly, when we see the ladies, and we always have to say, remember that this is their office. You have to treat it with respect. Nobody can come to your office and just disrespect you.
Just walk in, yeah.
So we have to go in and treat their office with respect, because it does pay the bills. It sends children to school. It pays for medical care. So it is work.
Rejesha, because you've already started to refer to it in terms of going to their office. So you've done a little, research. You eventually decide to come back to Kenya and start Rejesha. So just walk us through in brief, kind of what those steps were between returning to Kenya and starting this project. And additionally, what maybe data point were you chasing? In my intro, I talk about 40,000 women involved in sex work just in Nairobi. But I'm curious if there was a data point that really was inspiring you to make the shift to actually come home and start this project.
So the journey of coming back to Nairobi was a long journey. I think for me, that began almost 5 years before I actually came back to
From
Nairobi.
that coastal Kilifi trip to coming back?
From the coastal trip, it's 10 years.
That's 10 years, that's right.
That's 10 years by the time I was able to come back. I really wanted to come back and be able to plug in a way that it's helpful. So I knew that I cannot just pack my bags and then set up shop and I don't know what I'm doing. So I took my time and I wanted to get more experience. What is happening in other parts of the world? And for me, being in the UK at the time, I thought, what's happening in the UK? How might I be able to plug in? What experiences can I get from the UK that might be helpful back home? I'm not saying that everything that works in the UK would be a blanket solution and would work here. No, it doesn't. So going back to do my master's degree was actually very much informed by the decision that I had made that I wanted to come back home. So for me, I thought, what is the qualification or the education that I can get that will give me a ability to learn more about this thing that I'm so passionate about, and actually be able to give me an opportunity to go back home and research. So my choice for international development and concentrating on gender studies was informed by this passion that I have. So I felt like I started to do things from a reverse. I knew what it is that I'm passionate about, but what can get me there, and I need the experience.
And I just want to just cut in there just to say I really appreciate that. I think I mentioned to you this before we started, that I'm very leery of missionaries, which I don't consider you one, or I don't think you call yourself that one either. I'm not on my own for sure. But I really appreciate that you did a whole master's degree to understand this issue and be able to better serve your home community. I was really moved by that, because then it goes beyond, let me go and do something about a problem. It becomes very deeply entrenched in the understanding, the empathy that's required, the research that's understand, the skill. Like, you wanted to build skills, just like an engineer would, a doctor would, a nurse would, a teacher would, to be able to come back and contribute. So thank you for that, because I think too many of us think that our good intentions or our passion for something is enough. And it is not enough. These are complex challenges that are not born overnight. And we need people with the real skills to address them. We would never entrust a teacher to go and fix the roads in Nairobi. We would want a structural engineer, And so thank you for taking the time to understand it from a technical, research, data-driven academic point of view. I think that's so valuable, and what all of us should be thinking about as we think about the things that we're passionate about. So I just wanted to interrupt and say that, because I think it's really important that we start to approach the problems we see in that light. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So you were saying, so you got your master's, and then you decide, okay, you finish and then come back, or you spend more time in the UK? Yeah.
Not yet. I got my master's, and then I thought, okay, so even with a master's degree without experience, what is it still that you're going to do? So I took some time and I managed to get an opportunity to work with, I call them survivors of trafficking. So this is human trafficking from Africa into the UK. So working with young people from all across Africa, whether it's West Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa. And this organization, which is an amazing organization still in the UK, and was the only one equipped to really work with survivors of trafficking from Africa into the UK. So I plugged in there. I was so hungry to learn that I actually went to the founder, and I just said, I will do whatever it takes. Do you want me to volunteer? Do you want me to be an intern? I just want to learn. And she just said, I think you're what
Welcome.
We need. Come. And I worked there for a little while as an intern, and then I went back and was managing the survivors' care. And with survivors' care, I got to engage with policy work, policy development. So being able to sit in parliament with other professionals from different organizations and be able to advise on what is it that survivors of trafficking from Africa into the UK need. So being a voice.
Need to leave the profession, or need to now build a life?
Build a life.
Yeah.
Build a life, because trafficking is illegal. So once they are freed, or once they are rescued from the situation, what's the next steps?
Yeah.
How do they integrate back into society? Do they need to go back? Do they need to have an education? What about housing? All of those things. Do they want to pursue criminal
charges
from their traffickers? So that gave me so much good experience, and it's from that I was starting to understand even how does sex work come into this, because I think what we don't know is that sometimes some of the people that we might see on the streets, and you don't know that they could be trafficked to work as a sex worker. And yes, they could look the part, they could be standing on the street and looking like everyone else, but for some, they have been trafficked into the industry, and that is a huge thing back in the UK. You see women trafficked from Africa, from East Europe, from Asia, to come and work in sex work.
Let me ask you, was there a common theme or thread from the women that you talked to, or the individuals you talked to who were leaving, who had been rescued out of trafficking, that really kind of informed your next steps? Like, was there a common refrain, a theme of what they wanted for their lives next that stuck with you?
I think for all of these women or men who are trafficked to work in sex work, because yes, it is both men and women, it's from a place where you're seeking a better life for your family. You're seeking greener pastures. And when someone comes to your village or comes and finds you, wherever they might find you, and say, look, I have an opportunity for you in the UK that you could really plug in, and this could be the game changer for you and your family. You take it. You take it. And they are brought in with that. It's deception. And when we say trafficking, a lot of people think, oh, they have to be chained and they have to have someone who is beating them up. Actually, it's the mental deception. It's the mental chain that you have to go through. So someone says, okay, I will take you to the UK and I will be able to pay for your ticket, and I will even find accommodation for you.
Which that alone seems like a golden ticket, right?
It is.
We all know the stories of those who are waiting for years for visas or opportunities to leave, and someone says they'll manage that for you all of a sudden.
Everything
seems like a miracle.
You go because you're seeking better life for you and your family. So when you get into the other side, wherever this could be, I'm not just saying it's in the UK, it's all across the world. And actually it's happening in our own country. There is domestic trafficking. So when you get to that, the destination, the trafficker then says, look, you owe me. And now you owe me, it could be 300,000 pounds. That's a hefty amount.
Impossible.
It is impossible to pay. And now you will do anything that you can. You don't have your passport. You're in a house. You don't know anyone. You don't know the system. You can't trust anyone. And whatever you're told, you believe. If you're told you can't trust the police, and maybe you come from a country where you can't trust the police, you believe it. If you're told, if you say anything, this is what's going to happen to you, so you stay quiet and you do what you're asked to do. So a lot of the young girls that I have seen, that's usually the promise of, come, there is a job for you. Come, I have something for you. And then you get there. And actually there was no job. It was all force. It was all a fraud. And now you have to pay back the money that you owe.
So at some point you come back to Kenya. You start the Rejesha Project. And because Angela's just around the corner from us, I want to make sure we leave plenty of time to hear her story. Can you tell us in brief kind of how that project started and what you do? So that then we'll turn it over to Angela and hear a bit about how she got involved.
So I come back to Kenya. And I am going to the streets to understand. It's so important to understand what happens on the ground. I could never have come back and said, oh, I know, because I've seen it elsewhere. I know what happens. I needed time to understand what's happening. What are the needs? How do some of these ladies end up here? So I spent quite a few months on my own in the city. And I would go sit down, have a coffee, and just look and observe what's happening down below me.
So tell us more of the details of that.
Yes.
In town, at night, on weekends. Just give us the framework.
Yeah. So this is any day of the week. Mind you, I've just come back, so I didn't have a job.
Okay.
I had all the time. So any day of the week, I would go buy myself a coffee, and it's late in the evening. I literally would sit there till whatever restaurant or cafe that I'm sitting in will be closing. I will be the last one to leave. So late in the evening, and this is mostly around the Kenyatta Avenue, Koinange Street. So this is the historical red light district. I needed to understand, is this still happening there? Like what's going on? So then seeing that the women come, and one of the things that they do, they talk to the security guards. And I thought, okay, I think I feel brave enough to speak to the security guards first before maybe I approach the women. So that's what I did. I went and I approached one of the security guards and said, I've just seen that you talk to the ladies here. I have an idea, and this is perhaps what I might want to do in future. Can you help me understand how you know them? What's the relationship? And really, that's how it started. And I remember one time I spoke to this guard, and he just said, oh, these are my friends, and called these two ladies to me. And I'm just, oh my goodness, I'm not even sure what to say. And now I'm I'm scared. that's literally
So just
how
conversations.
Conversation. And I think once I had the first conversation with those two ladies, and then I went back again and I had more conversation with a few more ladies. So the fear, first of all, of course, I that went away. But then also you get to know people, you get to know the real person. And I would talk and say, look, I have this is the idea that I have. Would you be interested?
And what was
Do you
that
think-
idea?
So the Rejesha Project, I said, we want to set up a place where we can invite people to just come. Do you think that would be something that you'd be interested? What are some of the things that you might want to see there? And the idea for food actually came up because one of the ladies that I was talking to said, sometimes we come and I have not eaten the food that I had or the money that I had. I bought food for the kids. So I have come and I haven't eaten. I will only eat when I get my first job. So I thought, why not save that money that you get from your first job and come and eat with us? In October of 2019, we set up, we have a little space on Koinange Street where we set up food, teas, coffees, and it's mainly volunteers who come out. And we just invite the ladies and we ask them to come and eat a meal with us, and just come to this space and just be yourself. It's safe. There is no judgment. And if you feel free to talk, you can talk. If you don't want to talk, you don't have to talk to anyone. Just come. And we went out. We invited some of the ladies. And when they came, I remember the first night we had about 18 women come.
Okay.
And I thought, do you know what? I know where they've come. They've come to see whether who are these bunch of crazy people who want to set up something like this. But Lily, they came back the second time that we went and they brought their friends. And they started to say, this is a place where I feel I am seen, I am known, I am heard. And I'm not just seen for my body. I'm not seen for what I am selling, that there are people who are seeing me and seeing my heart. And that was so important to us. And they would come and we'll sit there for 40 minutes, an hour. And I'm thinking, gosh, I feel like we're taking so much of your time, but you're staying for an hour. Why are you staying for an hour? And it's because of that love and respect and dignity that you give people when you treat people as human.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I'm just going back in my head are your words from earlier that the women who you're meeting are those who have made a choice when they had no other. So now you've given them another choice to come and spend an hour to get a meal when maybe they didn't have that opportunity earlier in the day. So the idea is that you come every other week and you offer a meal, you offer tea, you offer conversation and connection. Rejesha has grown beyond just meals, though. What else are the services that you're offering women, and how has that gone since 2019? Because apparently there was a bit of a pandemic
Yeah,
that also came.
What was that?
Tell us a little bit about the last 2-3 years.
Yes. So set up outreach, and we still do that to this day. Every fortnight we go out, and it's the same.
I see the British piece of you is still there, the fortnight.
Oh, right.
Who says fortnight? It's not the British, right? I think that's just those guys. But anyways, continue.
It's still there.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's amazing. And we love that space, and we will keep it that way. That's our first contact with the women. So for those that we've known for a long time, like Angela, she still comes and we'll invite her friends and we'll send other people to come to that space. So every new lady that we meet them there. And as time grew, and of course with the pandemic, the real issue of now I don't have my source of income is at jeopardy. What do I do? And that the conversation of women saying, you know, I would want to do anything else but this, but I don't know where to start. I don't even know what that looks like. So we started to have conversation with women saying, I want out. Can you find me a way out? What would that look like? I don't know, but can you try and find me a way out? And we said, okay. We will start to do a few different things. We can experiment with a few things and see where it goes. So beginning of 2021, we helped some of the ladies set up small businesses. And Angela actually is one of our ladies that we helped set up small businesses. And over the period of that year, we realized, okay, so not everyone will go into business because this is not a blanket solution, right? And if we're going to help women set up businesses and then they don't have any skills to run a business, Are we really setting them up to succeed, or are we setting them up to fail? And then you have to also realize that for a woman who wants to start their journey to leave prostitution, it's not just about the money. There is so much more that they have to deal with. Is there addiction? Are they heavily addicted to drugs? What about trauma? They've gone through a lot of trauma on the streets. So what does that look like? Might we be able to help these ladies unpack some of the trauma that they have gone through? So beginning of 2022, we started to write a curriculum, which we have a whole curriculum set up, and it's called Tuvuke Pamoja program. And this program helps women who wants to exit prostitution. We call it a supported transition out of prostitution, because leaving sex work, it's a journey, and we have to respect that. It's peer-led. We piloted this last year with 5 women, and it was incredible. So in this, we have, for any woman who wants to set up a business, we have business skills training. For any woman who says, actually, I just want to go into employment and I really don't care what that looks like. So we have employability skills training. We have therapy. And
So
the therapy
important.
piece
Yeah.
has been a game changer for us. We have a qualified therapist, and she is amazing. She's a professional. She's also seasoned in life. So she's worked with women all across different kinds of abuse, and it's a trauma-centered therapy. That was such an incredible piece for us. We had women coming in and just being able to open up about things that they've never shared with anyone, whether it's childhood trauma, abuse from parents, or abuse from the work, or a lady saying, actually, do you know what I might want to learn from this? I just want to know how to parent better, because I don't want my children ending up in the kind of work that I have been in. How do I do that better?
I mean, Eunice, it sounds like so much of your work has been so responsive to the women in the program. I mean, starting off, the meals were a response to what you heard from women. Then the next step seemed to be, these conversations around job opportunities when COVID hit, and hearing from women that I need other options. And then hearing the next piece about this curriculum being peer-led. I think I'm really touched by that. This is responsive to what women are requesting for, which is such a different model of even development work, because development often is, we find a problem, we say there's no water here, let's build a well. And we don't always think about how far is the well, who can access the well, is there danger on the way?
Yeah.
You've really done it, I think, in a way that is so thoughtful, community-centered and community-led, which is the only way it's going to be sustainable in the end, is if the women themselves feel like they are the ones demanding what they would want, or not demand is maybe too strong a word, but who are driving the kind of the conversation and the choices for a change, that the choice is now in their hand, which is really, really powerful. I do have more questions for you, but I think this is a good time to pause and hear Angela's story. So let's turn our attention to our sister Angela. Angela, welcome again. Karibu sana. Angela, please tell us your age and where you're from.
Angela, tafadhali tuambie jina yako na umetoka wapi?
Naitwa Angela. Niko na miaka 39 na nimetoka hapa Kiambu County.
Her name is Angela. She's 39 years old and she's from Kiambu County.
Do you have kids? Are you married?
Uko na watoto na umeolewa?
Niko na watoto wawili, lakini sijaolewa. Niko na wasichana wawili.
She has 2 children, 2 daughters, but she's not married.
So, Angela, it's not an easy question, but I think it's an important one. How did you get started in sex work, and how long have you been in this profession?
Angela, hii swali si rahisi. Je, ulianza kazi ya ukahaba lini na umekuwa kwa hii kazi kwa miaka ngapi?
Hii kazi nimekuwa miaka 10 na nilianza juu ya shida. Nilikuwa na watoto, lazima ningesaidia. Baba mtoto alituacha. Nikafikiria njia nyingine ya kufanya tu ni kurudi kwa streets, kwenda kwa street kutafuta ndio watoto at least nisomeshe watoto.
She's been working as a sex worker for the past 10 years, and she started because she had a baby daddy who left her and the child, and she decided to go to the street so she could be able to take care of both herself and her child.
So before you had the baby and before he left, what was your work?
Angela, kabla upate mtoto na kabla uanze hii kazi ulikuwa unafanya nini?
Venye nilitoka nyumbani, nilikuja. Kwanza nikakaa na rafiki yangu, tukaanza akanitafutianga kazi. Nikafanya kazi kidogo, tukapatana na huyo mwanaume. Ndio sasa I think hata sikuwa najua ameoa, tukaanza kusumbuana, lakini nilikuwa nafanya kazi, nilikuwa nimefanya kazi. Nilikuwa nimeajiriwa kwa duka.
She came to Nairobi from Kiambu County. She stayed with a friend for some time. She did some casual work. She was working at a shop and she met the father of her child. She did not know that he was married. They stayed together for a while, but she was doing some casual work at the shop.
Did you find that you made more money in sex work? Was that why you changed from working at the shop?
Ulipoanza kazi ya ukahaba, je, uliona kama unapata pesa mingi kuliko kazi ya duka ndo ukaamua uache kazi ya duka?
Kwanza hiyo kazi ya ukahaba, sasa kazi ya kuajiliwa ilikuwa inanisumbua. Mara saa zingine hakuna pesa, ulikuwa unalipwa venye umefanya kazi. Sasa nika-introduce tu na rafiki tu wenye wanakujanga kwanza mkienda out, akani-introduce kwa hiyo kazi ya nini ya ukahaba. I think niko napata pesa kuliko duka, obvious. Ndio nikaacha, si kurudi kwa duka after kuzaa nilizaa nikakaa na baba mtoto. Ndio akaanza maneno, sasa ndio nikarudi, nikaanza saa ukahaba na hiyo. Yeah. Lakini nilikuwa napata pesa mingi kuliko hiyo kazi ya duka.
Angela found working at the shop a little stressful. They wouldn't pay on time, and she had a friend that introduced her to the sex work. They would go out clubbing, and that's when she was introduced to this line of work. And she found that she was making a lot more money, so she never went back to working at the shop. And it was around this time that she started having problems with the father of her child.
If you don't mind me asking, how much could you make in one night as a sex worker?
Kama hautaona vibaya tukikuuliza, ulikuwa unatengeneza pesa kama ngapi kwa siku kwa kazi ya ukahaba?
Hizo siku za kwanza tukianza, and unatengeneza tu pesa mzuri. Siku poa unaweza tengeneza labda 5,000, 6,000 kama hakuna city council kusumbuliwa, lakini from 3, 4, 5 huwezi kosa siku mzuri.
In the beginning, she would make anywhere from 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 in a good day. But that's when there aren't city council workers that are disrupting their work in the streets. So anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 in a day.
And how would the city council disrupt your work? Is that being jailed? Is that having to pay a bribe? How would that interfere with your day?
Watu wa Kanjo walikuwa wanasumbua aje? Wanawafunga ama mnawapatia hongo au wanaharibu kazi aje?
City council wakikuja, wanakuja kushikana, wanashika, unawabribe, unawapatia maybe 5,000 500 ama 1,000. Lakini ukikosa, ndio unapelekwa kotini and you're charged, tunaweza lipa 2,000 or you end up going Langata.
So you would either need to bribe them with about 500 shillings to 1,000 shillings. But if you don't have the money to bribe them, then they will take you in and you would have to then pay the fine at the courts.
For the solicitation, because it is a felony, right, Eunice? It's a felony under Kenyan law. So was there a typical day for you in sex work? And what was a typical day like if there was such a thing?
Angela, hebu tuambie siku inafanana aje kwa kazi ya ukahaba? Ukiamka, ukienda kazi, tuambie venye siku yako huwa kazini.
Nikiamka, siku ya kawaida naamka, saizi watoto wangu hawako, so niko peke yangu. Nikiamka tu naamka na unakaa tu ama unafanya kitu kingine ya kufanya. Hiyo ni tofauti na hiyo ukahaba. Niko na kitu kingine nafanya siku hizi. So hiyo ukienda town jioni, unaenda unauliza kama kuna city council, kama hakuna unaingia, unatafuta pesa, alafu unarudi usiku ama asubuhi. Yeah.
So on a typical day, she'll wake up, she'll just go about her day. Her children aren't with her right now, so she'll wake up. She has another side hustle that she's running right now. And then in the evening, she'll get into the city center, find out if the city council is around. If not, she'll get straight into the sexual work business.
So even from the daytime, it's not kept to an evening?
Kwa hivyo hata mchana huwa unaweza fanya kazi ya ukahaba ama ni usiku peke yake?
Mchana unaweza, but kama unaweza, lakini si kwa street, maybe kwa clubs, ama bado kuna dating sites, lakini huwezi simama kwa street, lakini kwa club unaweza enda mchana. Yeah.
You actually can carry out the sexual work during the day. It just won't be on the streets. You wouldn't be standing by the street side like you would in the evening. This would actually happen either in the clubs or on dating site apps, but not by the streets.
So how have you protected your personal health as a sex worker?
Angela, umejikingaje kiafya kujiangalia afya yako kama kwa hii kazi ya ukahaba?
Okay. Iyo on my side kuna jiprotect, kuna protections. Alafu bado kuna hospitali za government. Kuna hospitali ya government unaweza enda, una hospitali unaendanga, but it's our kucharge. Yeah, lakini unajiprotect. Kujiprotect lazima ujiprotect kwa streets.
So they will use protection, but there's also hospitals that they can go to. There's government hospitals that they go to and they don't get charged for whatever medical help it is that they need, but they will always use protection while carrying out their business.
So it sounds like the income was quite significant per day on a good day that you could make. How did the sex work, change how you were able to provide for your family?
Angela, hii pesa mnatengeneza kwa hii kazi inasikika kama ni pesa nzuri. Imekusaidia aje kuweza kuangalia familia yako tangu uanze hii biashara?
Tangu nianze imenisaidia kwa sababu at least hiyo time unasomesha mtoto, nilikuwa nasomesha mtoto, nimekaa na mtu nasomesha mtoto, unalipa nyumba. I think unalipa nyumba na unasomesha mtoto na pesa ya chakula. Iko tu imenisaidia, kusaidia yangu ilikuwa inanisaidia.
The income that Angela has received from this side of work has helped her to be able to take care of her family. She's been able to take her children to school. She's paying rent. She's feeding her family. So it's actually helped her take care of her family.
Angela, how old are your daughters?
Angela, wasichana wako wako na miaka ngapi?
Mmoja ako 21 na mwingine anaingia 18 this year.
Her first daughter is 21 years old and her second is 18 this year.
So you've been doing sex work, I think you said, for about 10 years. So They were quite young when you started, 11 and 8. Have they understood what your line of work has been these last 10 years? Do they understand?
Angela, wasichana wako wanajua wewe ufanya kazi gani? Kwa sababu ulianza miaka 10 iliyopita. Wanajua wewe unafanya kazi gani na wanaelewa hii biashara?
Okay, huyu msichana mmoja amesomea nyumbani, the firstborn, but huyu mwingine nikiwa na yeye ulikuwa na mwetu nafanya kazi usiku, nafanya kazi kwa club, hajawahi elewa nafanya nini juu kabisa, na mficha sana, hajawahi jua. Huwezi enda na mtu kwa nyumba, huwezi mwambia, hakuna kitu inafanya ajue, not unless ambiwe na mtu, na hiyo gap ni ngumu mtu akwambia mama yako anafanya nini, anafanya tu kazi kwa club usiku. Yeah, hajawahi jua.
Her first daughter actually went to school back at home in Kiambu, so she has no idea what her mother has done and neither what her mother does. Neither does her second daughter, because it's not like Angela brings her clients to her home and she hasn't exposed either of her daughters to her line of business, so they're not aware what their mother does for money.
Do you think you'll ever tell them?
Angela, unafikiri utawahi kuambia wasichana wako ile kazi wewe ufanya?
Siwezi waambia juu ni wasichana, siwezi waambia. Kwa huyu mdogo hata siwezi taka ajue juu anajua mamake amenipenda. Kuna ile love, unaona umekaa na mtoto kwa nyumba, struggle, babake akisumbua hivi na hivi. Siwezi mwambia hiyo kitu kuja kumsumbua, mama amepitia mob and sister kasikie hiyo pain kama alikuwa burden kwangu. Yeah.
Angela would never want her daughters to find out what it is that she does, especially her second daughter. They have a very special bond. They've been through a lot with the child's father, being disruptive in the homestead and them being there for each other. And because they're girls especially, she would never want for them to know what her line of work is.
So Angela, when you were young, when you were your daughter's age, when you first started this line of work, when you were 8 and 11, what did you dream for yourself when you were an adult?
Angela,
we can take a break too. If you want to take a break, yeah.
Let's keep running. Angela, ukiwa msichana, miaka kama msichana wako mdogo, ulikuwa unataka kufanya kazi gani?
Nikiwa mdogo, I think hata sikuwa sana nilikuwa nataka kuwa mwalimu. Ile kulikuwa tu mwalimu, na kutoka tu kitambo napenda watoto, so I think na watoto kuwa mwalimu. Yeah.
I've always loved children. Yeah. So from when I was young, I always wanted to be a teacher.
You're not old yet. We're all aging, but you're not old. Do you think those dreams are still possible for you?
Angela, wewe si mzee. Wewe bado ni mchanga. Unaona kama hizo ndoto zako bado unaweza hitimu kuwa mwalimu?
Saizi sasa hiyo mwalimu hapana, lakini si na toto unaweza taka na watoto, hiyo kana watoto wadogo. Napenda kuongea, napenda watoto sana. So hiyo hata nasa kitu kama daycare naweza taka sana watoto. Yeah.
Being a teacher, not so much, but Angela likes to be around children. So maybe setting up a daycare or working at a daycare or something. Yeah, she'd like that.
Angela, your work is not easy. And the data tells us that a majority of women in sex work experience violence. Have you ever experienced violence in your work?
Angela, kazi yako si rahisi hata kidogo, na kwa kazi yako watu wanadhulumiwa na wale watu wamekuja kwa biashara hii. Wewe umewahi kudhulumiwa kwa kazi yako?
Kwa bahati mzuri, hiyo nasema sijawahi pata na mtu amenidhulumu. But I think kwa stories nasikianga tu, si kusikia hata marafiki. Kwanza kuna rafiki yangu mwingine, I don't know wenye walifanyananga na mtu alikuwa na yeye, akamwagianga acid. Tusosa akamwagia acid na akamtupa gari ikienda. Wengine unasikia mtu amerusha gari ikienda, ameumia magoti kwa lami. Yeah.
Thankfully, I've never had an incident as such, but I hear stories from my colleagues and from my friends. One story in particular, someone said a friend of mine actually had acid poured on them and they were thrown out of a moving car. So thankfully it's never happened to me, but I hear stories.
So Angela, I know you've known Eunice for a few years now, so maybe tell me how you were introduced to the Rejesha Project.
Angela, najua Eunice umemjua kwa miaka kadhaa sasa. Tuambie tafadhali ulijuanaje na Eunice na Rejesha Project?
Eunice tulijuana 2019 December through a friend mwenye aliniambia kuna mtu ndapea namba yako atakupigia na atakuletea stuff za December Christmas. Eunice akaniletea, tukajuana 2020. Akakuja siku moja akaniambia, Angela, nataka kufanya kazi nyingine. Unaweza futa kuuza vitu ama kitu yote apart from kuja kwa street. Siku ya kwanza nikamwambia wacha tu lakini mimi niko 50-50. Eunice akainsist tena akaniambia, tafuta mahali, utafute shop, kuletea staff za kuuza, uanze hiyo biashara ya kuuza vitu. Mchezo tu nikatafuta mahali, nikapata. Eunice akaniletea vitu za kuanza, na nilikuwa na freezer. Nilikuwa na freezer kwa nyumba, nikaanza kuuza hizi ice pops za watu. Hapo sasa ndio nijue Eunice, tumekuwa kutoka hiyo time?
I met Eunice in 2019 through a friend. A friend of mine told me to come meet someone who was actually going to do some Christmas shopping for us. So I went, and there was Christmas shopping, and the Rejesha Project would actually feed us as well. And I'd keep going for these meetings. And this one time, Eunice asked me, Angela, do you want to set up shop? Do you want to do something outside of this business? And I just fully said yes, just to shut her up. And she asked me to go and find a place where I could set up shop. So I did. I didn't think she was serious. I went, I got a spot, and she brought me my initial stock. And a friend of mine had given me a freezer, and that's what I used to start selling popsicles. I sell popsicles to kids.
Have you continued with that business?
Umeendelea na hiyo biashara?
Nimeendelea nao mpaka saizi iko. And thank to Eunice.
Yes, she's continued with the business up until now, and she's very grateful to Eunice.
I would like to know what you would want to say to your fellow Kenyans on how they can support women who are in sex work like you.
Angela, naweza taka utuambie venye watu wanaweza kusaidia watu wenye wako kwa kazi ya ukahaba kama wewe.
Kwanza sana kama mtu anaweza kusaidia wale watu wako pale kwa street, ni kusaidia wale wengi wako si kutaka kuwa hapo. And mtu anaweza hata kuongea, kucancel mtu, kuongea na mtu, kumuuliza, kumsikiza hiyo, na kuacha, yani mtu hata akikuchukua mwanaume acha kutumia kama kutumia vibaya. Wale wengi wako na mashida mingi hapo, ni kufika hapo na at least kuwe na heshima tu, ikuwe anakuheshimu, mkimalizana anakupea pesa yako vizuri. Na counseling tu sana, hata kama utasaidia mtu, unaenda tu unaongelesha tu mama. Wale wengi hapo ni wamama, unaongelesha tu vizuri. Wanawake unaongelesha tu vizuri.
One of the things Angela would like for people to know is that the ladies that are out in the streets aren't there because they want to. Most of them don't want to be there. They're there because they have to. So lending a listening ear to some of them might be helpful. And the people that do come out as clients should then go ahead and treat the sex workers with some level of respect and dignity, and not just use and abuse them because they are sex workers. And definitely counseling sessions would be very helpful if those were extended to the ladies out there.
And, my last question to you, 2 questions. Are you still in sex work? And if so, do you see a day when you may leave the sex work?
Angela, bado unafanya hii kazi ya ukahaba, na kama bado unaifanya, unaona kama iko siku utaweza kuacha?
Kuacha ukahaba, niko na duka, lakini kuacha hiyo kazi sijaacha kabisa. Kwanza saizi kama duka ipik sana, zingine badala ya kukaa tu nitegemea nikule mpaka stock, narudi tena kwa street, najaribu kidogo, lakini bado duka sijafunga, na iboost, na siku moja tu mambo ikipik poa ndaacha kabisa.
Angela hasn't left the business completely. She has her business that Rejesha helped her set up, but when business is down, she will go back to the streets and get some money to boost her business so that she doesn't eat back into the stock. But she's looking forward to a time when she can be able to just sustain her family from her business.
Angela, thank you for sharing your story. It's so important and valuable, and I'm so honored that you would trust us with your story. So thank you.
Okay.
So, Eunice, we've heard Angela's story, and we know that there are others who are also working in the sex work space, other organizations. In particular, the Kenya Sex Workers Alliance, KESWA, has been around for a long time. And they are led by sex workers, initiated by sex workers, and are an organization that are advocating for the rights of sex workers under the law, increased protection, increased rights and visibility with policymakers, law organizations. They're not necessarily seeking to leave sex work, but want more dignity for sex workers within the industry. So I'm just curious, how is Rejesha balancing a woman's autonomy to choose and stay in an industry that Rejesha really does believe is quite exploitive. And as you said earlier, is only an option for women when they have no choice because they are poor or because they are marginalized. How are you navigating that fine line?
So one of the things we do, Lily, is we never force a lady to leave prostitution. If someone says, I would like to explore other options, then we will say, okay, let's see what we can do. And that's when we would sit down and try to even understand, what have you done before? Do you have any skills? If you want to go into business, is that something that you've engaged with before? What are your talents? What are you good at? So for us, it's important to remember that not every woman will want to exit prostitution, and that's fair. And like I said before, this is their work. They have educated their children. It has paid a livelihood. So we can't really go in and start to say, look, what you're doing, you need to stop. And if you're not offering different alternatives, and that alternative to be an incentive enough for a lady to say, actually, I like what you're offering and I want a way out, then they're not going to leave. But yes, it is true that women in sex work should be treated with dignity and respect. And that's something that should be offered, even as they're human beings, they're women. They need to be treated with dignity and respect. We agree with that. But yes, we will never, ever force a lady to leave. And it's not our job to come from a higher authority to say, but this is not a good enough job, or what you're doing, from a moral higher authority to say what you're doing is wrong. We would never do that.
I think one of the things that both you and Keswa are doing, which is really valuable, is putting out research and information around sex work itself. Keswa published a report in 2020 around the violence that women experience in sex work, and it's alarming. One of the reports, they say, quote, that women in sex work, 97% of them have experienced violence in the last 12 months. Economic violence, 86% of them have experienced it. Physical violence, 75% have experienced it. So, I mean, it's overwhelming, the violence that women are experiencing. So I don't think there's any argument that it's a dangerous field. And I think we need all hands on deck in terms of protection and support. And as we heard from Angela, there are real economic pressures that keep women in these professions. There seems to be no better choice or better paying choice, which is really sobering to think that we've created a society where a woman is paid more for offering sex than she is for offering a skill. Right. And I see that Rejesha is trying to offer the skill piece by offering training and investigating what women can do and trying to upskill them in those spaces. So, Eunice, talk to those who might be listening to this conversation and who are thinking about, how they can get involved, how they can support or be a part of partnering with you and the work that you're trying to do. What would you say to them?
And that's a very good question. And when I answer this question, I always say that there is something that anyone can do. I don't want anyone listening to this and thinking, oh, but I will never be in Nairobi. I will never be able to do the work that you're doing. I can't volunteer time. There are so many things that we all can do with what we have. So for those who are in the city and you resonate with this story and you say, I would like to give my time, how can I do that? There are ways to contact Rejesha Project. We are always relying on volunteers to come out and do the outreach that we have.
And we will definitely link that in the show notes, but it's Rejesha. Yes. Just spell that for us. So
Rejesha is REJESHA Project Nairobi.
ProjectNairobi.com?
.org.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes.
.org.
So for those who can give their time, absolutely, we would like to hear from you. But then there are other people who might say, look, I am able to give financially. It costs us money to keep our projects going. And I say with the project, the training project, to help ladies who are transitioning out of prostitution, through a period of 3 months, it's costing us around 60,000 Kenya shilling per woman to be able to support her out of prostitution. So currently we have, and we just started a new cohort literally yesterday.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We have 7 women. So that is going to require finances. We're always in need of financial support. If we're going to keep our work going, we need it.
And just to be clear, that transition includes the therapy that you mentioned earlier, the skills training.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
So that's the 12-week program.
The curriculum that you've set up.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's trained by myself and my colleague, and we go to we have a place where we go to the ladies. We always say that we will go to the women, closer to them than them coming to us. So all of that requires money, and also our outreach. Even though it's a small and it's simple, but we still require to pay the rent for the space, reimburse travel for our volunteers. So we do need a lot of money to keep our doors open. But for me, the most important piece that I want to connect with people in our city is we're looking for partners. And these partners, if you're listening and if you belong to different professional networks and you're well connected, you have a business perhaps, and you think, look, I have opportunities that I could offer women who are looking to get employment. Is that a cleaning job, perhaps? Is it a job at the back of the house? It doesn't have to be at the front of the house. If you run, say, a coffee shop, we're not saying, but they won't be able to do the customer service skills. There are so many other opportunities that we can offer. And let me tell you what, a lot of these ladies have so much skills and talent that, given the opportunity to thrive and to showcase those talents elsewhere, they really come out. We have Angela, who said she used to work in a shop.
Definitely.
There are
and
skills.
what drove her out of that, which is really sobering, is the fact that they weren't paying on time.
Yes.
It's not that she didn't have the skills or even that the opportunity was that there was the inconsistency of that opportunity drove her to look for other ones. Who wouldn't do that, So, okay, so it sounds like there are a lot of ways people can get involved. Rejesha Project Nairobi.org, where they can find out ways to get involved.
Yes.
So as we close, my last question for you, and then I have two for you and Angela, is, what have the women of the Rejesha Project taught you?
Ooh, wow. That's a good question. And for me, they have taught me joy. Joy in the face of so much adversity. When everything is going against you, but you still have a reason to choose life, to choose your children, to risk your own life so that your children have a better future. That is something that when we see these ladies standing on the street, we judge what we see. We don't get to see their motivation, their heart for their own families and for their own children. When we're in this room, outreach with these ladies, let me tell you, the laughter and the stories and the joy that is in that space is incredible. That's something that I want people to know, that these ladies have so much life in them.
That's beautiful.
And actually, when we're leaving, every time we go out to the streets, and we were out on Saturday, I can't wait to go back out again. I seriously cannot wait to go back, because these ladies have become my sisters. Some of them are old enough to be my mothers. And actually, when they walk into the room, I say, Mama. I call them mamas. Others are younger than me, so they're my younger sisters. They have so much love to give. We have received that love. And that's something that I will always tell of the ladies on the street. So they have so much to offer us. Stop judging the book by its cover. Stop judging just by what you see. And then you judge, is the dress short, too short, and that's what you judge. There is so much about them that we don't get to see. And we need to stop just long enough for people to let their mask fall off and they show you who they really are. And they're incredible women.
Thank you for that, Eunice. You're bringing me to tears as we finish which is not good because, I have fake eyelashes on today, so they're going to come right off. But I want to ask both you and Angela what I ask every guest before they leave the show. Angela, I'll start with you, and then Eunice, you can answer as well. What's your favorite drink?
Angela, kwa hii kipindi si huwa tunauliza watu maswali mawili. Hatukuwa tumekutayarisha. Ni kinywaji gani unapenda zaidi?
Gilbis.
That doesn't need translation. Nice. Gilby's, I know. Okay. And you, Eunice? What's
Oh my goodness.
on this hot Wednesday afternoon that we're recording?
Do you know, I am also going, if it's I'm relaxing, I'm going the gin and tonic.
Gin and tonic. You're not
Gin
going
and
to
tonic.
boost a brand here,
No,
like
I'm
Angela
not gonna.
did.
I'm not gonna
You're
go
not
for.
going to say it, but also
yes,
gin and
but I
tonic.
have my
Okay.
favorite, but gin and tonic for sure.
And then, you've already touched on this, but the Salam and Hello is a show about joy and justice. Those are the stories we try and tell here. And Rejesha Project is very much an intersection of both, a story of joy, as you just pointed out, and about justice. I think it's important for me to elevate stories where we're not saying, feel bad about this, or this is an act of charity. No, what the work you're doing is an act of justice, of restorative, economic, social justice.
Yeah.
So to extend that conversation and go back to the joy, I ask everyone who comes on the show, what is bringing you joy? So maybe, again, Eunice, you've already said it a bit, so I'll give you time to think. But Angela, we'll start with you. What is bringing you joy today?
Angela, nini nakuletea furaha leo?
Furaha.
Wow. Kukaa, kuongea, kushare hiyo story. Sana sana hiyo story about life yangu mimi ongea nasikia vizuri juu ya my daughters. Sasa nikiongea na nikipata mtu kuongea na yeye nasikia raha, hiyo ndio inanipea raha.
It brings me joy to share my story because I know I'm paying it forward and somehow helping my daughters. So it gives me joy to share my story.
Thank you for that, Angela. You're making me cry too. Okay, Eunice, take us home. What's bringing you joy?
Do you know, for me to be in a place where this started as such a small seed, I call it a mustard seed, and to see it grow to the place, to the point that it has reached today, and to have so many people say, Eunice, what you're doing, how can we plug in? It was a dream that it lived in my heart for so long, and I didn't ever think that anyone was going to be interested in what I have. I thought I was just going to be a misfit in this society. But to have so many people say, I want to be a part of that. I want to get involved. How can I plug in? That gives me so much joy. And I just say, come along. This is a wild trip that we are on. Come along. And to even have women like Angela to accept me and to love me, and not to know, not because I have all the answers, but to just say, I like what you're doing. I like that there is something about you that you're offering, and I want to be a part of it. That gives me so much joy.
Thank you for that, Eunice. Brings me joy to meet some other gin drinking Christians too. So let me just say
yes,
that as we close out today. So listeners, thank you. Thank you for staying with us in this conversation that I think is just so important. Angela, asante sana for telling your story. You're absolutely not for just your daughters, but all of our daughters. I have 2 daughters also, so you're paying it forward for them as well. And listeners, if you want to learn more, you can find Rejesha Project, as Eunice said, rejeshaprojectnairobi.org. You also have a social media presence, so we'll put all of that in the show notes. You can find all of their details. And of course, we want to hear from you. Send us a message, DM us, tell us what this made you feel, what your own stories might be around issues of sex work or social justice, or how you're getting involved in your communities. We always feel lifted when we hear from you. So it's Lilly at salamandhello.com, or, slide into the DMs like people are wanting to do on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's at salamandhello, and it'd be a joy to hear from each and every one of you. Rate and review the show, subscribe, all of that. Thank you to our translator today. We're so grateful to have her services. I'm not sure if she wants me to say her name, so we'll just put it in the show notes. But thank you so much for the Rejesha team that also made this episode possible today. And until we meet again, be easy, y'all. Talk to you soon.
Good job, guys.